So we just finished up the book of Judges. And right now we've reached a very critical part in the narrative. So again, just so you understand, the way this is working is, and I was talking to my father, he's visiting, just kind of explaining the survey we're going through. We're not doing a book-by-book evaluation of all some 39 books of the Old Testament. We're not doing that. What we're doing is we're explaining and going over the narrative of Israel's history as sort of the movie plays out, okay? The way the English Bible categorizes the Old Testament is by genre. But we're going through it through chronology and in the chronological order. That's how we're doing it. So you can see the redemptive plan play out. That's how we're going through it. And we just finished the book of Judges. And right here, this moment in the book of 1 Samuel, that's where we're going to be at this morning. This is where the narrative takes a sharp turn. And it's from this point forward, Israel is going to be seen very differently. Israel's starting to fall apart at the seams right now because remember, the leader that God raised up for Israel, the first leader was Moses, right? And he's dead. He was their leader. Now Joshua is dead. He was the second leader. He was the one that God raised up to send them to the promised land to be both their military leader and their spiritual leader, and they're dead. So as a result of having no leader, these 12 tribes of Israel are now functioning sort of independently from each other. They're dysfunctional. They're disunion from each other. There's chaos here, and that's starting to show here. And we talked about last week this book of Judges, that cycle, right, where they sin, right? God judges them, makes their enemies conquer them, and then they come to that sort of covenantal repentance. God sends them a judge, a leader to deliver them. They live in peace, not peace with God, but they live in peace among the nation. Remember, they don't have to worry about famine or wars. They don't have to worry about being conquered because there's peace there. Once the judge dies, they go right back into it. Same thing over and over and over again. And the book of Judges ended with what we really determined is the problem. The problem is they have no leader. Right? That's what the very end of Judges said. Judges 21:25, I think it was. It says that they had no king, therefore they did what was right in their own eyes. This is the sort of the thread of the problem here. Remember, we talked about last week, and Andrew made a really good point about the judges, and I do want to bring that up real quick. These judges that we saw, they were leaders, right? They were people that God rose up to sort of govern the people. But these leaders were wicked people, meaning they did acknowledge God. They were Jews. They did accept God. They had a relationship with God, all these things. But the point is that they were wicked in the sense that they were evil people. Some of them were murderers. Gideon was a murderer. Samson was an adulterer. Gideon killed his fellow Jews. Remember we talked about this? So these people were not good people in that sense. This is why they were wicked people. And I wanted to clarify that because Andrew brought up a really good point, because Hebrews 11, I think it is, right, talks about that these people did have faith in God. But the point is they weren't people to emulate. These judges weren't people that we should strive to be like, because they were fallen, wicked people. And anything else you want to say on that? Because I thought what you said was very good.
Yeah, so we... Most familiar with Hebrews 11. This is the list of faith heroes.
Yep.
These are examples of Old Testament saints, like they're clearly Old Testament saints. And among them are listed in verse 32, these judges. Here Paul is sort of wrapping up that list of people. He sort of gives, he gives like just a scattering of names. He says in verse 32, what shall I say more? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon, and of Barak, and of Samson, and of Jephthah, of David also, and Samuel, and of the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, wrought righteousness, and that's important. They wrought righteousness. They obtained promises. They stopped the mouths of lions, etc., etc., etc. And then we can jump down to verse 39. And Paul writes, and these all, having obtained a good report, so they obtained a good report with God, through faith, received not the promise, God having provided some better thing for us, that they without us should not be made perfect. In other words, those closing two verses, that means that they were justified by faith, just as we are, but they were looking forward to the atonement. So they were looking forward to that promise of atonement. So their redemption for that time period was forestalled in that sense. So that's what Paul's getting at here. They are in the category of Old Testament saints, and they look forward to the promise as we look backward to the promise of the cross.
Amen. Yeah, of course, Tom.
One more very important.
No, very informal.
So I get it, they're wicked men because we're all sinners.
Yeah, I'll say.
We're all sinners. Nevertheless, the whole point in Hebrews is to call the Jewish Christians to encourage them not to go back because they're thinking about turning, right?
We have a better covenant. Yeah.
Right, and so the whole book of Hebrews is to show how the new covenant is better than the old in every aspect. So it's really the author is calling out to the Jewish Christians, say, look, if you go back, you got nothing to go back to. You sever yourself from Christ. It's Christ or nothing. So this 11th chapter brings all of these Old Testament saints up as examples of faith. Apparently, that's what I get.
Oh, yeah. That's the faith chapter. Yep, you're right.
So when you say they're evil and wicked, yeah, but it doesn't mean they weren't redeemed.
We're redeemed, yes. And that is a great clarification.
Right.
Because the Taylor was kind of talking about, people tend to emulate these people.
Right.
And while they're redeemed, they did have faith in God. They were
Right.
of the redeemed, but they were still very much wicked sinners.
Right, but we expect to see them in the hereafter.
Oh, wow. Is it right there?
Right.
Yes. Mhm, very much so.
All right, I just wanted
And yeah, that's a great clarification. That's why I wanted to bring it up, because these people, what really that part of Judges is highlighting is that even the leadership amongst Israel are fallen people. Because again, who's this ultimately pointing us to? A righteous leader. One righteous leader, because all the men and women before them have failed, because Deborah was one of the leaders. So all the leaders that God raised up, all God had to work with were fallen people. Gideon murdered people outside of what God called him to do, to go slay other cities. He killed outside of that, so he's a murderer. Samson was an adulterer, right? So all these things, it just goes to highlight the depravity of man in its totality. And it's a great clarification on it.
Isn't that literally what we're dealing with today? I love that point, but we do the same thing today. We want to look at Steve Lawson or whoever, and we want to highlight these people. And even in the Old Testament, God's like, look at me, not them. They suck. Look at me. Look what I can do with the sucky people. So even today, we need to be aware of, no matter how good a person is, they're still wicked.
Yes, everybody.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's value in following a David and following a Paul, as long as they follow Christ. Whoever happens to be.
And that's kind of that whole John MacArthur aspect is we don't emulate them, we don't idolize them, we don't lift them up. We love the Christ in them. I think that's why, things like when Steve Lawson.
I'll declare
Yeah, oh, very much so. Very, very clear. So that's kind of that whole thing, is the judges are people that are fallen people, and even people like Gideon led the Israelites to idolatry. That's what he led them to when he made all the gold into that ephod, and they followed it, and this is what happened. And kind of back on track is these people of Israel have fallen into idolatry. This is what happens. They are now adopting the Canaanite way. This is what's happening. The judges have sort of died, and they let these Canaanites dwell amongst them. So what's happening? The Israelites are letting them live amongst them. And God said very clearly back in the law, do not let anybody live. Why? So you don't become like them. And they did. And now they're worshiping false gods. You're going to see the word Baal come up a whole bunch from here forward, because that's one of the Canaanite false gods. You're going to see Molech come up. So at this point, the Israelites are a very fragmented people. They're a very loosely connected people, and they operate independently of each other while being sort of governed by these judges. And again, these are the judges that God has raised up himself. Judges that did believe, but they were just sinful people. People not to put on a pedestal, people not to emulate. And right now, Israel sort of acts as a theocracy. You're going to probably hear that term come up a bit, theocracy. Theocracy is sort of a nation governed by God. And how he's doing that right now is through these judges, these leaders. God is governing people through these judges. But this is all about to change. From this book forward, Israel is no longer going to be a theocracy, really. They're going to be what's called a monarchy. This is where that big shift is about to happen. They're no longer going to be governed by these judges. They're going to be governed in a monarchy, a united, remember that, they are now going to become a united monarchy. They're going to go from 12 independent tribes to a united monarchy that is ruled by God through kings. And what's going to happen is, hence the problem, Israel has come to reject God. This is the main thrust of the problem. Israel doesn't want God as their king anymore. They want another king like every other pagan nation has. They got a guy sitting on the throne in their nation. They want a guy sitting on their throne who is not God. And here's where we enter into the book of 1 Samuel. 1st and 2nd Samuel. So in your Bibles, go to the book of 1 Samuel. It's right after Judges. You're going to skip Ruth and let's go to the book of 1 Samuel. Now, just so you know, the book of 1 and 2 Samuel is actually one long scroll, one giant book. We just break it up because of how long it is. So, the book of 1 Samuel is about a man named Samuel. He's a prophet. He's a prophet of God. And Samuel was dedicated by his mother to be a servant of God from the very beginning, okay? Now, Samuel here is the last main judge. So the first 8 chapters of the book of 1 Samuel is actually the very end of the book of Judges. So Samuel is the last main judge. Remember, when you think judge, don't think of a courtroom judge. Think of a leader. That's what that word judge means, someone who's really leading. Now, we talked about the judges, how they are wicked people. We understand all that. But what's going to happen here? Let's go to chapter 7 for a minute. I want to sort of show you something. You're going to see Samuel as a judge here. This is important. I want to establish that you see that he is a judge. He's going to be the last main judge. Look at verse 15. It says, "Now Samuel judged Israel all the days of his life. He used to go annually on circuit to Bethel and Gilgal and Mizpah, and he judged Israel in all these places. Then his return was to Ramah, for his house was there, and there he judged Israel, and he built an altar to the Lord." So Samuel serves at I would say a transitional time. Samuel is the prophet at a transitional time when they go from a judge, a sort of theocracy run by judges, to the transition of a monarchy run by kings. And Samuel is sort of the hinge point to all of this. The hinge point to this entire book comes in chapter 8. This is really everything. This is the middle section of everything. Go to chapter 8, look at verse number 4. Here is the hinge point to this entire book. Look at verse 4. And we're going to explain all this coming up. It says, "Then the elders of Israel gathered together and came to Samuel, this prophet of God. He came to Samuel at Ramah, and they said to him," remember, this is the leaders of all of Israel. "And they came to him," Samuel, and said, "Behold, you've grown old, and your sons do not walk in your ways. Now appoint us a king for us to judge us like all the nations." But the thing was displeasing in the sight of Samuel when they said, "Give us a king to judge us." And Samuel prayed to the Lord. The Lord said to Samuel, "Listen to the voice of the people in regard to all that they say to you, for they have not rejected you. They've rejected me from being king over them. Like all the deeds that they have done since the day I brought them out of the land of Egypt, even to this day, in that they have forsaken me and served other gods. So they are doing to you also. Now listen to their voice. However, you shall solemnly warn them and tell them of the procedures of the kings who will reign over them." What did Israel just make very clear? They don't want God as their king. They want somebody else as their king. And God tells Samuel, Okay, if they want a new king, I want you to let them know what this new king will be like, what is it going to be like under this new king, and he will not be merciful to you like I am. But look at their response. Look at verse 19. Nevertheless, even though the people know that this coming king, other than God, is going to be brutal to them. Verse 19, nevertheless, the people refused to listen to the voice of Samuel, and they said, no, there shall be no king over us, that we also may be like all the other nations, that our king may judge us and go before us and fight our battles. Again, the people hear this. This is kind of the crux of this problem. The people of Israel thought that it would be better to be ruled in affliction than to be ruled by God. They knew that this coming king would be merciless and brutal, and we're going to explain all this here coming up, but they thought all that better than to be ruled by God. The same God that delivered them out of out of Egypt, the same God that provided for them in the wilderness, the same God that has done everything for them time and time and time again. They thought it better to be ruled under affliction than by the merciful God. Let that sort of sink in. And it is from this point forward that we're going to start seeing the united monarchy and the kings. Questions on that? Go
Do
ahead.
you think that part of that might be you're ruled by God and you're accountable to God? God is in your business. He knows all your secrets. He knows all your ways, and he's going to hold you accountable for it. A wicked king off somewhere in some other city, you can still have your lifestyle and your wickedness, and he's not aware of that, so I get to have my evil ways, and nobody's going to be judging me.
Yes. People, and it carries over even to today. People, they love sin. The New Testament makes this very clear. They hate the light because they love darkness. They love sin. And the one thing that God is demanding of them is to address sin. God does not want his people to live in sin. He wants them to live separate from everybody else. But that goes against what? Our nature. That goes against our very nature. And so these new kings, it's far better for us to live under affliction, but be able to indulge in our sin. Yes, 100%. They don't want to be accountable to God because God is accountable. God makes them be accountable to the covenant. And if they're not, he judges them. They don't want that.
Like we mentioned earlier, God saw the guy who took the little statue and hid it in his saddlebag.
Sure.
Nothing is lost on him.
Nobody knew except God.
But if you have a worldly king, he's going to know.
It'll all be hidden. Yes. So that's kind of what I'm with you on that. That's the way I said. They don't want him because they're in constant sin anyway.
Yeah.
So they're under affliction anyway, right? They're constantly getting beat up by the enemies. They're under affliction, but hey,
Slavery.
we might as well be able to indulge in sin at the same time.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I see it.
But they don't know, I mean, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of God, so he's revealing who he is, so they don't even understand. We like to say, hey, they're picking their sin, and they are. I mean, we need to understand that flesh and faith and all, but they don't have any form of reference. I mean, God, like you're talking about, God knew. They don't understand a God that knows their inner workings. All they know is God's that they appease and they do, and then he leaves them alone. So a God that knows your heart is foreign. I mean, that's a foreign concept. So they're thinking, I want a God, and if we get a powerful enough God like Jehu went back to the calf, his idol worship of the calf, which is power, and that's what he operated in. So yeah, we like to think they like their sin. We all do because we're sinners, but God's revealing, okay, I'll give this. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. He's trying to kind of beat it into him with that covenant. And then in the meantime, he's showing them who, but I'm the God of, and I just don't. I mean, we can look back at them with the whole counsel of God, but that would be hard.
Because they don't know what we know at this point.
Yes.
Your point, right? God is sort of at the being unraveled to them.
Yes.
Right? We get the benefit of looking back and say, oh, well, this is how we think they are based on the next 600 years of, Old Testament history.
Yeah.
But they're living in this very moment, and
They're looking at
God and his
power.
nature is sort of being
Power. We can
revealed.
rule. We just need a strong enough king, and they don't understand that God is the stronger king, or the better, wiser, whatever. It's crazy. I'm sorry.
No, you're good. That's excellent. So, right now, verse 8, chapter 8 serves as the linchpin. The problem is that they have no king. So they're doing what's wise in their own eyes, but they do have a king. Who is supposed to be their king? God is. But they have rejected God. You're going to see this. They've come to reject God as their king. They want somebody else on the throne except God. So here's where we sort of begin the book of Samuel. Now, as we get into the book of Samuel, it's going to highlight three people. 1st and 2nd Samuel highlight three main people. That is a man named Samuel, who's the prophet. It's a man named Saul, who becomes the very first king of Israel, and a man named David. You all heard of King David. Now, the first 7 chapters of the book of Samuel, as most of us know the story, his mother, Hannah, is barren, right? She cannot have children. It says that the Lord has closed her womb. And what does she do? She prays to God and says, Lord, if you give me a son, I will dedicate my son to your service. And so what happens is, in chapter 1, verse 28, it says that she, Hannah, cried out, "O my Lord, as your soul lives, my Lord, I am the woman who stood here beside you." And she was praying and petitioning to God, and God blessed her. God acknowledged it. And what did he do? He gave her Samuel. And so she dedicated Samuel to the Lord's service. Now, what tribe was dedicated to the complete service of God? The Levites. And what tribe do you think Samuel came from? The Levite. So Samuel is a Levite, and it says that in 1 Chronicles 6. He is a Levite from the tribe of Levi. So he is also a priest. You're going to find this out here. So not only is he a prophet, not only is he a judge, he's also a priest. Those are the three functions that Samuel plays here. Now, since he is from the tribe of Levi, he is going to grow up under a man named Eli. He is the high priest at this time. And how many high priests are there at one time? Just one. And it is this man named Eli. Now, I want to talk just very briefly about this man Eli. He's not very significant, but what's coming up will be significant. So this man Eli was the high priest, and he had 2 sons. And these 2 sons are very wicked people. Wicked meaning they are desecrating the tabernacle, they are insolent to God, they are arguably rejectors of God. And what happens is this man Eli refuses, as the high priest, he refuses to address his son's wickedness. He knows his sons are rebellious, he knows they're bad people, but he refuses to address it. So as a result, God is going to do 2 things. God is going to kill his 2 sons, and you'll see why this is important. God is going to kill his 2 sons, and he's going to strip Eli of his familial favor from God. And that's what God is going to do, kill his 2 sons for their insolence and their sin, and he's also going to remove the favor off of Eli's family line. And I tell you this because let's go to chapter 3 of 1 Samuel. I want to spend a couple minutes here because this chapter, kind of to Hillary's point, we're getting to see, again, at this point in Israel's history, they're learning about God. They're learning the attributes of God, who God is, what he's like, and you're going to see a lot of this in chapter 3 here. There's 3 things I want us to cover in chapter 3, and we're going to unpack those 3 things. If you look at verse 1 of chapter 3, it says, "Now the boy Samuel was ministering to the Lord before Eli, and word from the Lord was rare in those days. Visions were infrequent." So we can see here that since the birth of Samuel, it says that God remained relatively quiet in his revelation of himself. When you consider how much he revealed himself to Moses, when you consider how much he revealed himself to Joshua, remember he came to Joshua as the military leader. So God encountered personally Moses and Joshua, but he never appeared, it says here, visions, it never appeared in that revelatory sense to Samuel. But Samuel worshiped God, and Samuel loved God, and he served God. But he never had that encounter with God like Moses did, like Joshua did, and the priests did. So one night, Samuel and Eli are sleeping in the temple, it says here. And the Lord calls out to Samuel. And by the way, that Hebrew word has the idea of the prophetic calling. So God is calling out to Samuel here, that prophetic call, to call him to be a prophet. But Samuel thinks it's Eli calling out to him. So Samuel keeps going to Eli saying, are you calling me? And Eli's like, no, it's not me. So over and over and over again, God is calling out to Samuel. And finally they realize that it is God himself calling out to Samuel. Look at verse 10 of chapter 3. It said, the Lord came and stood. Here's that encounter. Then the Lord came and stood and called as of other times, Samuel, Samuel. And Samuel said, speak, your servant is listening. So God is standing right in front of Samuel, calling him to service. Look at verse 11. The Lord said to Samuel, behold, I am about to do a thing in Israel at which both ears of everyone who hears it will tingle. In that day, I will carry out against Eli, this high priest, all that I have spoken concerning his house from beginning to end. Earlier it says, remember, what is God going to do with his two sons? He's going to kill them. And he's going to remove Eli from God's favor. Verse 13, for I have told him that I am about to judge his house forever for the iniquity which he knew, because his sons brought a curse on themselves, and he did not rebuke them. So you can see here, this is the first thing that I really want us to understand about God. Again, we've been seeing this over